This is Nick Baisley from FilmSnobbery, and I'm here at the Palm Springs Short Film Festival, and I am here with a couple of young ladies, and I'm excited. Who are you?
My name's Emily Harold.
And?
Megan Abell.
Fantastic. And what are you here with?
Reporting on the Times, the New York Times and the Holocaust. It's a short documentary.
And that the world didn't hear us was like being buried alive.
The only newspapers that were delivered to our home was the New York Times.
They didn't put it on front page coverage. They should have. It turned out it was an important story.
The Jews in the United States during the 1930s were frightened beyond imagination. They knew that a noose was tightening around the neck of European Jewry.
Arthur Hayes Sulzberger was the publisher of the New York Times, came from a very distinguished American Jewish family.
Arthur Hayes Sulzberger was very concerned that the New York Times not be perceived as a Jewish newspaper. They lived in an anti-Semitic city, and they lived in many ways an anti-Semitic world.
During World War II, so basically from September of '39 to May of 1945, the New York Times published 1,186 stories about the events we now would describe as the Holocaust. 6 front page stories that said specifically on the front page that Jews were being exterminated. Almost all those other stories were inside the newspaper. You know, they could be anywhere from page 2 or 3 to 17 to 31. And that was basically the way the Times handled this news throughout the war. It was reported accurately, it was reported in detail, it was reported in a timely fashion, but it was for the most part buried inside the newspaper.
The problem with history is that whatever happened, and in a way, it's not a moral issue. Would placing those articles on the front page, on the second page, with a strong title, change the course of history and the fate of the Warsaw Ghetto?
Everything where the person was discriminated, killed, and starved to death. How could another human being look at it and not to write about it?
What was burning in Auschwitz was our humanity.
You know, it was the old story, as the banner says, all the news that's fit to print.
And it sounds kind of self-explanatory, but what is it about?
It's about how the New York Times buried reports on the Holocaust during World War II. They put stories on back pages.
Interesting. And why did this subject really kind of say this needs to be told as a movie? I mean, and if not just a short documentary, but why not even a feature for something that sounds like a breaking news, as it were?
Well, it was a student film, so we didn't really have the finances to make it a feature. A short was really what was available to us. And I was in a history class where I learned other histories about the Holocaust, things that we don't usually learn. And one of those things was the fact that the U.S. government knew about the Holocaust, knew about concentration camps. It was in the newspapers. And it was just something that was so shocking to me because I learned this in college. Up until that point, I had just thought it was happening in Europe and that no one in the United States could know. So that was very shocking, and it led to the film.
And you're director?
Yes.
And producer?
Yes, I'm one of the producers.
Fantastic. Now, one thing I like to ask all the producers we ever have on any of our interviews is, what exactly do you do?
Well, there were actually 3 co-producers, and the other 2 worked a lot on pre-production, and I was the one that was mainly on set, every shoot except for maybe 1 or 2. So I did whatever needed to be done
on set.
Whatever needs to be done. That's awesome. No, and did you guys find any difficulty in getting the info? I mean, I know it's just it's a short, so you didn't have to worry about getting enough information to fill a feature. But did you have any problems at all getting information or interviews or any material related to finishing the film?
Well, since this is based on a book, all of that kind of information was readily available. And we didn't have to worry about getting permission from the New York Times because it falls under the fair use purview.
I love the fair use. It's like, that's my jam.
Yeah, so that was great. So, newspaper clippings, all of that kind of stuff we were able to use. There were a couple people that backed out of interviews, but that when you're in documentary, that happens. For the most part, we got all the interviews we needed, and I, in retrospect, got many more yeses than I guess I should have suspected. Most people were really willing to be in the film.
What did you think was the biggest reason people said yes to it? Was it because they felt that the story needed to be told? Did they feel that it's just like, I personally have not, I've been silent too long, this is now my chance to do it? I mean, when you approach people to do it, to come out and put their face on camera and all that, I mean, what did you feel was their biggest reason to respond yes?
Well, half of my interviews were people that think the story is important. So they wanted this voice for like the author of the book. It's, she's been studying this for over a decade. So, they're just interested in the topic and they want to talk about it. The flip side of that is we wanted people from the New York Times. They're not necessarily going to want to speak to me. But the thing that I really tried to do, and we really tried to do, is make the film not judgmental. So when we approached people from the Times, I said, I want to hear your opinion about why you think this isn't important and why you think we shouldn't be making a film about this. Some people that we spoke to did not think it was worthy of a film. But in crafting and getting all those differing opinions, it makes the story for the viewer something that they can decide for themselves. So I think that helped a lot.
What were some of the challenges from your perspective that you faced in helping get this film made? I mean, would you show up and have to occasionally cajole the occasional person, be like, come on, just do it, yeah, come on, or was it just keeping things on schedule, or is it mundane things?
Keeping people on schedule was a lot of it, and just making sure everyone was comfortable with things. But I don't think we really had an issue.
Well, we
had that one time. Oh, you're talking about Jake's?
Yeah.
We had this one experience where
we interviewed a lot of old people.
Where the subject was so old, he had like a carer, and at one point we had to move him, but the carer had left, and then he just toppled over. That was one of the scariest experiences.
I used to, I can relate. I used to deliver home medical equipment and supplies to people myself, and I've been in situations like that where the home health aid is not available, and it's just like, what are you going to do? I mean, you can't just leave the person in whatever state they're in. They need help. I understand that, and it's interesting. Did both of you feel the emotional connection of, it's been a decent period of time since the Holocaust at this point, and we're not talking hundreds of years, but, there's been a separation, generations of separation. Did you guys still feel as emotionally tied to the subject matter now, and now that you've made it, do you also still feel, has it become more work, or do you still feel the emotional attachment to it?
I think we have a tendency, especially with something like the Holocaust, to be like, oh, it's the Holocaust, it happened. But, we had the opportunity to look in Holocaust survivors' eyes and hear their stories. There is a wealth of archival footage from that period of people laying on the ground, no clothes, completely, like skeletons. And so to see that and to hear these stories on a one-on-one basis, and then to couple it with an article on page 7 about the extermination of 50,000 people, the emotion definitely comes back and it resonates. Even when we watch the film, even when I watch the film now, there are pieces that still get me.
Yeah. How about yourself?
Well, I completely agree. I think some of the most poignant moments are when you see an article about the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto, and it's next to an ad for hair cream or hairspray, and you're like, shouldn't this be higher up on the priority list?
I think it depends who you're speaking with when it's a sensitive topic. I'm finding older generations are still much more sensitive to it. Our generation, not so much. But I think what does make it sensitive is when you compare it to things that are happening today. I mean, there's genocide happening today, and when we say, we're not paying attention to it, I think that makes it much more hard to talk about. There's a friend of ours that watched the film for the first time today, and he couldn't say anything about it because it was just like, he was like, I'm really glad I watched your film and then I watched a comedy, because it is difficult to think about.
And you think it's difficult to go from a movie like this to another, if you were to decide to go to another movie, it's just like, not even just to watch, but to make another movie, and to, it's like, can you go from the a Holocaust documentary to a comedy? I mean, it seems like it'd be really tough,
Oh, do you mean making us?
Making, yeah.
Well, I think we're focusing now currently mainly on documentary, and our next one, which Emily, I'm sure,
good segue,
would love to speak about, is going to be about the Cold War. So. Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second. What do you have a plan? Is it a feature or short?
Good question. I feel like we're still young enough that it's still between a short and a feature. We haven't gotten to our point in our careers where we know we're going to have the finances to be able to make it a feature. But let's just say it's a feature for now.
Okay.
There's a woman named Miriam Moskowitz that lives in New Jersey, and she's 97 years old. The quintessential American grandmother, but she's also a convicted felon. In 1950, she was suspected of being a member of the Rosenberg spy ring. Has proclaimed her innocence for the last 60 years, but given the post 9/11, Patriot Act and what's happening in that regard, she feels like she needs to take a stand, and so she's going to try and get her name cleared before she dies.
As documentarians, at this point, you're documentarians. Do you feel a responsibility to kind of tell these socially relevant stories from not, it seems like at this point, our past, but do you, how do you see them affecting future generations?
Well, I also have a history background as well as being a filmmaker, and I feel like history repeats itself, and we can learn a lot from looking back. So. Also history, we think of history as being this, facts. This is how it happened, this is what happened. And for the most part, the stories that draw me in are the ones where, we learn it one way and it turns out that that's not completely true. So I learned that World War II, America was the great savior. And to find out that wasn't the case, it was in the paper, that shocked me. With this next film, the McCarthy era is this big period that we don't talk about at all. And here we are giving up our individual freedoms for the sake of national security. Is that appropriate? That balance. And I think when we look back to the McCarthy era, it can inform today.
And with the expectation of like complete and total nationalism at all times, otherwise you're suspect. Yeah, but and how about yourself, even as a producer? Do you want to continue to go and produce more documentaries? Do you ever want to maybe branch out into working on narratives?
Well, yes, I would love to work on narratives. I'm actually an actress as well. So.
I never would have guessed.
So I'm splitting my time between mainly theater. I'd like to get into more film, but. So yeah, we're starting a production company together, but I don't know that it's specifically going to be documentary. But yeah, I'd love to do features.
I'm excited about that too, because I really have a strong liking for women in film specifically. And do you guys ever feel a responsibility as women in film to kind of, just really, what's the word I'm looking for? Represent, I guess?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you're in an industry where it's, male dominated. So, and it's still so male dominated in comparison to many other.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's not necessarily all your fault.
On behalf of my gender, I apologize.
So it is, it is important. And I think we do think about the fact that we are women filmmakers and making sure that we're not the last ones. We want more women filmmakers. So
most of our crew were female. I think we had like one or two people in the crew, but we really try to support that. And I'd love at some point to start actively finding scripts written by women that we could produce.
Have I got people I can introduce you to? And there's some fantastic, we'll talk off camera, I'm guessing there's some fantastic groups out there that actually specifically look after and advocate women working in film, and specifically even like crewing up females and stuff like that. So it's fantastic. But I want to thank you right now for coming here and being a part of the Palm Springs Shorts Film Festival, and also sitting down and chatting with me for a little bit. So I really do appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to checking out the film, because it really does have such a powerful message to it. I mean, and again, like we kind of demonstrate, like there's still emotional reaction to a lot of the material, and it's really great that people to know that truth, and it's great that you guys sought it out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.